Echoes at Crooked Creek. The road that leads south out of Harrison, Arkansas, winds through the kind of country that still holds its secrets. Pine and oak crowd the ridges, and hollows fold into one another until you lose all sense of direction. Every bend looks like the last. Every narrow bridge hums with the same lonely sound of tires over timber. I came here on a gray November morning, chasing a name I'd first read on a weathered headstone in the Pleasant Ridge Cemetery, Ella Barham, 1894 to 1912. Locals in Boone County still speak her name softly, as if sound alone might stir the ghosts along Crooked Creek. It's been more than a century since that terrible night, yet people here still point to a certain ridge, a shaded gully, or an overgrown field and say, that's where they found her. No marker, no sign, only a hush that falls over the land itself. I parked near a rutted lane not far from where the Barham homestead once stood. The house is long gone, replaced by hayfields and scrub cedar, but the creek still runs as it did. Shallow, cold, with a current that slides over pale stones. In the distance, cattle grazed behind a sagging fence, their bells faint as wind chimes. I followed a narrow deer path down toward the water. The earth smelled of wet leaves and iron. In November 1912, this place was smaller, rougher, and much more isolated. 18-year-old Ella Barham had lived with her family here, helping with chores, visiting neighbors, and dreaming of the new hat she meant to sew from cloth bought at the Pleasant Ridge store. She rode off on horseback that Thursday morning and never came home. By nightfall, her mother had sent her brothers searching through the hollows, their lanterns glimmering like distant stars among the bare trees. They found her body before dawn, dismembered, hidden near the mouth of an old mine shaft. Even now, standing in that quiet place, I felt a weight settle around me. The creek whispered over stone, the same as it must have whispered that night, when the searchers stopped in shock and grief. I tried to picture the scene, the horses stamping in the dark, the hiss of kerosene lamps, the men's voices breaking as they called for the sheriff. News traveled slowly then, but outrage burned fast. By morning, all of Boone County was aflame with rumors. Sheriff James Helm gathered a posse, and before the week's end, suspicion turned toward the Davidson family, neighbors whose land lay not far from the Barhams. Otis Davidson, a young farmer with a rough reputation, was arrested after a long night of searching. Some said there was blood on his clothing. Others swore he had been seen near Crooked Creek that day. The evidence was circumstantial, but gruesome. Bare footprints in the mud, pepper scattered to throw off the dogs, a hair ribbon caught on a thorn. As I followed the creek's curve, I noticed how the sun broke briefly through the clouds, flashing silver across the water. I could almost see the old search parties crossing here, their boots sinking into the same clay banks. Time in the Ozarks seems layered, one century laid softly atop another, the past visible beneath the surface, if you look long enough. Otis Davidson was tried the following spring in Harrison. Newspapers described packed galleries, women fainting, and the sheriff keeping his pistol close. The trial lasted 5 days. The verdict, guilty of murder in the first degree. He went to the gallows, behind the Boone County Courthouse in August 1913, the last legal hanging the county would ever see. Some swore he confessed, others said he died proclaiming his innocence. Pieces of the rope, they say, were cut and kept as souvenirs. The Barham family remained in the hills for a time, but the Davidsons fled. Even after the execution, the case divided the county, half believing justice had been done, the other half whispering that the real killer had gone free. A century later, the doubts still ripple through the stories told at cafes and feed stores. Old-timers will lean back in their chairs and say, "It wasn't Otis. He was just the easiest one to hang." I climbed to higher ground where the mine once opened into the hillside. Only a shallow depression remains, filled with rainwater and dead leaves. Frogs croaked, and a red-tailed hawk circled above, its cry thin and distant. It's hard to imagine that this gentle hollow was once the scene of such horror. I knelt, brushing aside a layer of leaves, and found a shard of blue glass, Maybe from a medicine bottle, maybe from a jar dropped decades later. Still, I placed it back where I found it. This wasn't a place to take souvenirs. Standing there, I thought about how easily history slips into legend. The newspapers called it the most brutal crime ever known in the Ozarks. Church sermons thundered against moral decay. Preachers warned that God's judgment had fallen on the guilty. Yet beneath all the noise was one simple truth. A young woman's life had been cut short, and no verdict could restore it. In her photograph, the one preserved at the Shiloh Museum, Ella looks calm and composed, a faint smile on her lips, her eyes steady. She could be any girl from any small town, dreaming of adulthood and the wider world. When I finally turned back toward my car, the afternoon light had shifted to amber. Mist drifted from the creek like breath from the earth itself. I paused and listened, not for voices or footsteps, but for something quieter, the sound of water moving endlessly past the stones. Somewhere upstream, it had once carried the echo of searchers' shouts. Now it carried only time. At the edge of the road, I met a farmer mending a fence. When I mentioned Ella Barham, he nodded slowly. "My granddad knew her folks," he said. "She was a good girl. Mama said the land never forgot." He looked toward the darkening ridge. "Every fall, about the time it happened, the dogs won't go down by the creek. Don't know why. Maybe. They still smell the blood." Driving away to find yet another cemetery and another headstone, I glanced in the mirror. The ridge was fading into shadow, the fields turning to gray. Somewhere behind those trees, a life had ended violently, and a story had begun, one that refuses to die. In the hush of that Ozark evening, I understood why people keep coming back to Crooked Creek. It isn't curiosity alone that draws them. It's a kind of duty. To remember, to stand where she stood, to listen to the whispering water and promise, silently, that she won't be forgotten.